Hey, Warpugs, guess what time it is? It is time for a fan with too much time, and it is time for Star Wars vs. 40K, episode 43, The Lords of Catastrophe. Now, X in chat if you're here, X in chat if you're awake. Let's see everybody. Hold on a second, posting this up, just in case anybody's in the Discord not there. It is time for war crimes. Yes. Boom, boom. So, how is everyone doing tonight? We are going to be doing part of this tonight and the other half tomorrow night. The reason we're not doing it all in one night is just simply because, wow, the amount of time. This is going to be a huge episode, guys. It's going to be massive. It's going to be just... I can't wait. So, has anybody seen Fan? Because I already know that he's going to be making an appearance at some point tonight, and I can't wait to see him. When last we left, we found out Tarweiler was an Alpha Plus Psyker. Our boy Lazarus is good to go, and he's safe now. There's a whole new detachment of Jedi coming down to the surface, and Mace Windu is pretty much sending them to their deaths. Thank you, Prophet. Hey, boss, I'll let you say whatever happens in part 1 is nothing compared to what you'll witness in part 2. Also, you're a boomer. Thank you, my good man. All right, so if you spoil anything, Diclonius will unleash the ponies on you. He will. I already know this. You're loading an HG mag? Nice. Get the Hospitaller on this one. The Hospitaler's actually taking care of some stuff. Let's see. Hold on a second. 1 second. Does she need to be here now? Josh Tompkins says, I refurbished / messed up my sleep schedule just to watch the stream. Well, Josh, sorry, but the only reason I'm not doing all of this tonight, or at least trying to, is because I have work tomorrow as well. Did you see the pic I sent you? Yes, I did. Yes, I did, Diclonius. Believe me, I got a thought for that. If you spoil, you'll send you to Jesus. Comrade Dog, thank you very much, my friend. All right, so 1 second. You guys are insisting I get the Hospitaller in on this, right? Because the Hospitaller hasn't been really, following this as closely as I have. X in chat, the new prophet, he sent me 27 messages in Discord. And guys, I just now sat down, so I will respond to your message in Discord as soon as I'm able to. Yes. Everybody, the Hospitaller. By the way, the Hospitaller is starting up her own YouTube page where she's going to start putting up covers to songs and things like that. She's going to be singing. Persephone Rose is the Hospitaller's YouTube account. Go by, say hey to her. And we're actually going to be putting together a small little studio in the house for her, which is going to be nice. The Hospitaller is here. All right, guys. Are you ready? I'm ready. X in chat for Fan. Let's go. Oh my God. I have been waiting for this. I have been waiting for this, guys. And start off the stream by nuking Prophet. X in chat. Oh. Josh? Thank you, Josh. This is my attempt at bribing you to make it a 5-ish minute lore on Farsight. Josh? Just gonna let you know, that script is finished. It's not a 5-ish. It could be a 5-ish, but it's not. That script is finished. I have to update it with a little bit of information, but the script for Commander Farsight is finished. I don't know how I'm going to react to that. Thank you, Josh. I really do appreciate it, bud. Death Grips, really, really appreciate it, Josh. You have no idea how much. Death Grips, you haven't seen it yet, but I'm probably certain we have more Eversor Mommy Waifu. X in Chattanooga. Death Grips for being... Send him to horny jail. Send him to horny jail. Thank you guys so much. You guys have no idea how much I appreciate your support. Here we go. I hate Tau. Okay, the lead up to this is kind of bullshit! This is kind of giving me that 28 Days Later vibe. That slow build-up.
His hand was steady, the aim down his arm as rigid as a lance. The man on the end of it did not plead for his life, did not appeal for mercy or even rationality. It was that, among a handful of other things, which enabled 1313 to spare his life, at least for the moment. It may not have seemed to matter a great deal. They were all going to die before this was over.
It's our boy 1313. Come on! Come on!
But there was a significant difference between death in the line of duty and death as a form of execution. The young man was not this flesh.
Thank you, Parker Close. My joke bribe counter Josh bribe not to release Tau propaganda. Believe me, it's not Tau propaganda. It's not Tau propaganda. I have to find a couple of voice actors, but I'm gonna have fun with it. Thank you, thank you, Parker. I appreciate it, bud. 1313, our good boy has gone bad. Come on, man.
It was not this body that held him. He was duty, and he was the honor of Krieg, and even more than that, he was a sinner. He was born a sinner. His mother a machine of contrivance, his father's the duality which raged within him. Chairman Vinsark, Colonel Yurton, both bearing the tattered standards of his origin within his flesh, and more importantly, within his soul. He was penance caging sin, a contrition to last 100,000 generations. His blood was filthy, and only duty and death within that duty could cleanse him of that impurity. He was unworthy of life. He had known this since his eyes first opened. He lived only to die. That was the ultimate truth of the sons of Krieg. For Krieg had sinned, and that sin was in him, as well as the will to redeem it. 13, please don't do this, she begged him, not pleadingly, not pathetically, but desperately. Straight as his arm was, so too was the long lass pointed directly into the side of his head. But it was not the fear of death that affected him in those moments, and she was begging to save his own life as much as that of her captain.
Oh, God.
The words, spoken by Corporal Emiliana, stung him deeply, quaked him to his core. But that core was buried deep and held firm in a grasp as cold and rigid as the bunkers of his homeworld. The tremors she sent to that place did not.
Board Brewer 1998 said that he made the Eversor waifu thing as a joke for fan using anime, or he didn't expect it to snowball into this. So you're the one to blame. Congratulations. Everybody, Vita virus bomb this guy into non-existence and send him to horny jail.
Could not reach to the surface, and no sign of his pain reflected on the bare face of the 15-year-old soldier. Nothing she could say would change the need for his duty to be done. General Order 99 was absolute, and it was not for him to choose his superiors nor to judge their orders. Commissar Shadrick was what he was who he was, and both of those things were a Captain Commissar who had been sent to this place to take command of the Guard. Though for a time, he had entertained that Lazarus as a saint could hold command, that illusion could only stand until challenged. The edicts born of the Reign of Blood left no room for interpretation. There was no place for the ecclesiarchy within the command structure of the Astra Militarum. This was law. And, if not a saint, then Saint Lazarus was not but a sergeant, and a sergeant could not challenge a commissar captain. The orders were clear. The chain of command was clear. The place where his duty lay was clear.
Okay, seriously, I'm not even joking around right now. I want this art. I want this art. Because this looks pretty awesome to me. I'm just saying.
But that did not mean that carrying it out did not pain him, nor that Emiliana's pleas did not cut him. To the contrary, and to his great surprise, they cut him deeply. The look in the eyes of the Cadians, who themselves were restrained by orders given, bore into him in a way he had never expected to feel. It all hurt terribly. He had felt pain, felt the dying of his flesh. Even now, he lacked an eye taken by Republic blaster fire. Even now, he lacked an arm shorn from him by mechanical mercy. Even now, his wretched body was spotted by a million bruises and scrapes, burns and cuts.
Right, Chris?
But he had never felt this pain before. It was new. It was a penance, he tried to tell himself, but it did not feel that way. It felt like a punishment.
13, answer me! We shed blood together. We fought the replicate together. I saved your life, and you saved mine. The least you owe me is an answer!
She demanded again. He tried to. He opened his mouth, but suddenly realized he could not speak. He knew the words. They were in his mind even now. Matter-of-fact answers, as logical as math. General Order 99 had been issued. The Commissar claimed the authority of the Inquisition. All further thoughts were worthless. All further action, heretical. It should have been so easy to say. But as he looked into the back of Captain Stern's head, his pistol pressed against it, even as the man kneeled on the ground before him, Corpsman 1313 found he was at the very edge of his strength, and he hadn't even realized it until now. He could not look away. His eye, his intact eye, hurt, his vision fogging. What was this pain? This weakness? His hand was almost trembling. His heart was beating faster than it should. Was he sick? Was he cursed? Corporal, you will be silent, or you will be kneeling alongside the former captain. I'll have your honor stripped from you, and your shame will carry to your family and sisters in the Scola. Do not make me address you again, said the Commissar, who, even then, was approaching Stern, his face...
1313 is being affected by the feels, okay? He's being affected by the feels. Board Brewer earns chicken from Panda Express. Josh Tompkins says, Krieg become human. This is true. I feel so bad for him, man. I really do. God, this...
Scrunch
Come
in
on!
an attempt to hide his ugly smile. It was not a successful attempt. 1313 said nothing, even as he felt another sting strike him, this time from the Commissar. Again, it was something he should not have felt, and he puzzled over the burning sensation in his chest as the aftermath of the words settled in. Anger? Insult? He was taking offense. For Emiliana. A person who was not even he himself. A person who was not even from Krieg.
God.
Why?
13. I didn't know you were a coward.
Oh!
Came the rueful whisper from the corporal, incited by his own silence, and another lance of painful emotion shot through him, moving like a ghost's own hand and ignoring his coat, armor, and uniform. Whether or not Shadrick heard her was unclear, as he was distracted a moment later as Sergeant Vett approached, his gun discarded and laying on the ground, showing he was no threat as he neared. Instead, in his hand was a short-range Vox receiver and broadcaster, the green, squat, blocky device raised forward as he walked. "Far enough," said the Commissar Captain, and one of his remaining...
I want to slap this guy. I want to Viper uppercut him into the stratosphere so he can, land on the underside of one of the drop pods that's coming down to drive him to the surface of this planet. I'm just saying. Prophet, what have you done? Prophet says, "Oh, boss, I've done something," and he has the laughy face thing going on. Hold on a second. One second, guys. What have you done? Prophet, what have you done? Prepare the nukes.
Men aimed a
Thanks,
gun
Prophet.
at Vett, who
What have you
froze,
done?
but continued to hold the Vox out. "It's a message for you, sir. Message for the man in command," Vetnex reported, and his phrasing, more than anything else, purchased the man his chance. Shadrick smirked and jerked his head forward, the man aiming the weapon at Vex coming closer and snatching the device from his hand, moving back towards Shadrick once he had confirmed it was not some kind of hidden explosive. "I am not a coward. I do not fear death," 1313 managed to say as this played out before them, keeping his voice strong and even, but low. He wanted to look at her as he said it, but he couldn't. His muscles were bunched too tightly at his neck. His heart was beating painfully. Every beat was like a pump of cool, yet searing poison, acting as an internal demand. A demand that he simply die right here and right now. And yet, why? He could not understand it. This pain that now assailed him without wounding.
Oh, my boy.
All around him, he was doing no different from all of his brothers. All soldiers of sin fighting to die in order to restore the honor of Krieg and the almighty God Emperor. The silent men of Krieg stood in ranks, guns aimed, unafraid of potential return fire as they targeted the Cadians in the room.
Come on, my boy. Come on, my boy!
The other Imperial soldiers aimed right back at them, though most did so from cover. Yet none on either side fired, all obeying orders of a kind. Did the other corpsmen, his brothers in every way, not feel this pain as well? Did their hearts not ache as his did? And why? Why did it hurt at all?
No, you don't fear death. You run towards it. You crave it like a shard addict.
Emiliana continued to say, voice whispering angrily.
That is what makes you cowards. You are so afraid, so unwilling to use what the Emperor has given us all, that you cannot wait to die,
she said, her long lass still aimed into the side of his head. The Vox communicator was deliberate.
All right, it is a serious thing when somebody can call a Krieger a coward.
To Shadrick, and he placed it to his ear, pressing the right button as he did to accept the communication.
This is Captain Commissar Shadrick, in command of the Astra Militarum forces at the Basilica of Salvation. What is your report?
He said into it. The Commissar was not prepared for the booming reply that came out from the device, which Vetnex had set to its loudest, speaker-like setting prior to handing it over. A setting the Commissar had been unable to anticipate. In truth, it was more unexpected than loud, but in the tense silence of the room, it rung out clearly so that all could hear.
This is Saint Lazarus. The angels of death are here. The Emperor's angels have descended. We are all retreating back to the Basilica right now. Commissar, I need you to prepare a...
said the grainy but recognizable voice of the newly anointed Imperial Saint. Shadrick did not listen to much of it, dropping the Vox and crushing it with a powerful stomp of his armored boot. I do not take orders from a sergeant. The Commissar snarled contemptuously.
You definitely, this sumbitch definitely has a lot of anger issues, and when he shits it burns. I'm just saying.
You, Vetniks, back in line, he added, pointing a crooked finger at the sergeant, whose face creased, but nodded, doing as he was ordered to.
Commissar,
said a Krieger who stood nearby. What is your number, soldier? Shadrick snapped back. The Krieger raised his gun barrel as he hefted it and saluted.
1,541, sir.
The masked man said. What do you want, 1,541? Asked the Commissar Captain.
Permission to voice an opinion, sir.
Requested, 1521.
Wait, what?
Permission denied. Resume your duty, ordered Shadrick, and the Krieger nodded without hesitation and resumed aiming his weapon.
That guy would have definitely wound up in the Krieg Cavalry, because he just had an opinion.
Instant obedience brought a smile to Shadrick, helping him recover his mood and resuming his approach before he was standing above Captain Stern. Before long, Commissar Shadrick was kneeling, stripping Captain Stern of his weapon and sidearm, holstering his own gun to heft Stern's glowing plasma pistol, Acadian relic. 1313 could not see the man's face, but he knew it must be fixed in an unpleasant expression as he silently endured the humiliation.
You are terrified of sinning. You are terrified of doing anything but dying. You are terrified of the price of living.
Emiliana continued to hiss.
You are so afraid that all of you, your entire regiment, is jumping at the first chance to murder yourselves. All because that man has given you the authority to be what you were trained to be. Cowards! We haven't lost yet.
I am sorry, you just lost me. You just lost me. You can't say that about Kriegers.
The God Emperor sent back Saint Lazarus to save us. He promised that help was coming, and it is. But you have no
The Space Marines are landing!
real faith. Just a death wish that you think will absolve you.
She accused him. These words stung worst of all, because deep within, he knew they were true, and that truth was surfacing like some hideous beast from the ocean of his spirit. How he longed to be freed of his fear, to finally enter death, to be granted grace and forgiveness by the loss of his own life, to become incapable of wrongdoing, to finally be judged for this test, this cursed life, to at long last be over.
At long last, you're 15, your breath still smells like Similac!
No one had ever called it fear before, but it was. Yet now there was something else taking root inside him, rising as the Commissar rose with his new trophy.
This is the definition of the easy way out. You don't fear pain or injury. You fear your own free will, your emperor-given mind. You're terrified of it just because it might lead you to a mistake. You ignore the fact that every single Imperial hero didn't allow themselves the luxury of an easy death. They were brave enough to think. They dared sin and found salvation. They did it in the face of death because they knew that even an easy death is...
Emiliana was saying, her voice now dripping fear of her own, desperation thick in every word. But 1313 finished her words for her, speaking before he even realized that the words were escaping him. No death at all, he whispered, shocks of ice rolling through him, images of his limited past flashing through his conditioned mind.
Yes?
Emiliana said no more, and he still did not have the strength in him to turn and regard her, so he knew not what expression she turned on him then. The Commissar turned an eye on them, noticing their chatter, but his attention was called away an instant later. It's done, Commissar,
good lad.
said one of the tech
Be
adepts
the lad!
by the hanging bombs control panel. Seemingly in response to his word, panels opened up all along the enormous weapon, thick armor and plates rearing back to reveal vibrant green canisters, each one a vial of the Death Eater virus, the plague which would devour this world. But 1313 did not look up to see it, did not crane his head behind his body to gaze upon the death of them all. All he could do was stare into the back of Captain Stern's head, and the Imperial Aquila that was tattooed there. The eye of the twin-headed eagle gazed up into his own, one head blinded, one head whole. Why did he feel as though he saw judgment there?
Yes!
In that single avian eye? Why was that judgment so cold, so painful? Did he worship the Emperor?
Yeah!
Or did he only worship death in the Emperor's name?
This is wrong.
Emiliana whispered, barely audible now, as Shadrick
If Fan cuts this off and goes to another scene, we riot!
smiled and turned to face Captain Stern one last time. Was this wrong? Why was he asking that question? It was not his job to judge that. He was but a tool, a soldier. He had his orders, and good soldiers followed orders. That was what was demanded of him. He was safe, even if the orders were wrong. They were not his responsibility. They were not his sin. He was just doing his duty. The Emperor had to know that. Emiliana had to know that. Captain Stern, the Commissar began to say as he angled his new, stolen weapon down to aim into the Cadian's head. The men and women here will all die as martyrs to the Imperium's cause. They will enter the Emperor's final service with the highest honor a guardsman can achieve, having given their lives for victory. But not you. You who led them against me, who broke the chain of command to obey a false saint. Shadrick proclaimed, flicking a switch on the gun he held, plasma beginning to heat within the coils. These words also struck at 1313 himself, still standing behind Stern, taking a few steps back as Shadrick prepared to execute the man personally with a very powerful weapon. What the Commissar had just said was implicitly wrong. Lazarus was no false saint. In fact, it was because he was a saint that they could not obey him above Shadrick. Again, he reminded himself that it was not his place to judge his superiors, to decide when they were right and wrong. You will not be martyred. You will be executed here and now by me. In the Emperor's name, I condemn you to his darkest judgment. May he purge your soul of the fear that led you to this weakness. Pronounced Commissar Captain Shadrick, the archaic weapon in his hand beginning to keen deeply and glow. Emiliana drew in a hissing breath, and though he could not see it, 13 knew her hands were now trembling. So was he, almost trembling.
Come on.
This is wrong, and you know it.
The corporal insisted, speaking more loudly
Come
now,
on.
directing the words of the Commissar instead of the Krieger. Shadrick's eyes slid over to her, and he scoffed openly. Already the sins of your captain infect the rest of you Cadians. It is better that you should die now than be seen for the laxity you now display in your duty. I always knew it lurked beneath the surface. The Cadian Guard has long been overlauded, but if you were the match of Krieg or Carcosa when it came to virtue, then perhaps Cadia would not have fallen.
Oh, how?
The idea that the Imperium
What the?
would see the loss of a world and the continuing survival of its regiment as some kind of strength or victory has always been laughable. If you had more steadfast resolve, more faith, more willingness to do what is right, then perhaps Cadia would not have ever fallen at all. And if it did, then justice demands you fall with it. The cruel Commissar condemned, smirking widely a moment later when the signal light atop the beacon he still wore over his shoulder
This sumbitch really just said that.
began to glow and blink. And it was as this occurred that 1313 realized that Emiliana was right and Shadrick was wrong. that it did not require a deep judgment to realize it. This was no opinion. This was no chanced or measured thought. It was simply the truth. Commissar Captain Shadrick had lost his mind and was issuing orders and making proclamations which were fundamentally wrong. The sons of Krieg had broken their own world and killed nearly everything on its surface because Krieg had sinned. Cadia had shattered, and yet its soldiers fought on, unbroken despite the breaking of their own homeworld. Weakness and vileness was the legacy of Krieg, and the very blood from which they all sprang, himself included. Heroism and sacrifice was the truth of Cadia.
Oh, come on!
A truth that had carried them all the way to a new galaxy. A truth he had seen with his own eyes. How could 1313 ever have thought differently? Good soldiers followed orders, but when various contradicting orders were given, and the cold pages of the Munitorum manual offered a path that led into what was explicitly wrong, explicitly untrue, then what was a good soldier to do? Did he fight to die, or did he fight to win? The decision hovered over him like a lethal blade, pending his choosing of a path. The path of righteous duty, or the path of potential victory? Gritting his teeth, emotion breaking the surface of his placid features, he made his decision. "You are mistaken," growled the young man as he lifted his aim up from Captain Stern's head. Shadrick was still smirking as the gun's barrel was raised and pointed into his own center of mass. The Commissar's eyes began to change as the words were slowly absorbed, but the change scarcely had time to reach the rest of his face before the young soldier continued. "Commissar Captain Shadrick, your judgment is impaired. In accordance with Munitorum Regulation 3123, I am divesting you of command until such a time that your mentality can be assessed by someone of higher rank," the Krieger announced, making the man's face redden.
Our boy!
"I am here on behalf of the Inquisition. That regulation does not..."
Shadrick began to contest. "Present evidence for the claim," 1313 ordered, and Shadrick found himself almost salivating with rage.
Yes!
"What are you saying? You do not even have cause to believe that I am unsound. I am under no obligation to..."
He began.
"You just dissed Cadia, you ass! Like any Imperial citizen will have thinking you're one of two things. One, you tripped, fell, and bumped your fucking head, or you're a heretic. One of the two."
And to yell, but once more, the
one of the
Krieger
two,
cut
that's
him
it.
off. Krieg sinned. The 15-year-old soldier stated, his face melting back into placidity, all pieces now in their place. Shadrick growled and began to lift his own weapon away from Captain Stern.
"You insubordinate cur!"
The Commissar howled. Cadia stands. 1313 finished. His voice flat,
Excellent
matter-of-fact,
chat!
his eyes level, steady as steel. And his heart did not ache as he pulled the trigger and fired the searing stream of light from his silvered hot-shot las pistol. The discharge was lightning fast, finding the center of Commissar Shadrick's chest before he could even blink.
Yes!
It was a brief moment as
Fuck this motherfucker! Yes! Our boy's back, baby! I knocked my headset out. I love it. Yay. Yes. Yes. I'm happy.
as the air and armor there were atomized by the close-range impact of the hyper-agitated light photons. And then, the void created by the blast was rapidly filled, collapsing the air and throwing the discharged commander off his feet, back slamming into the floor with a loud crack. The room was frozen then, every mind shocked by the sudden turn, though 1313 did not pause as he raised his pistol, bending his elbow to look around it and see the damage he had done. smoke and soot rising from the now unmoving chest of Commissar Shadrick.
About time this guy
Satisfied with
died.
the shot, the Krieger nodded once, very slightly, and then looked to the side, half expecting to be executed himself, but having in him no fear of death at all. He saw that nearly every soldier in the room, Krieger and Cadian alike, was staring directly at him. The exposed faces of the Cadians slack-jawed beneath their helmets. But his eye found Emiliana's face first, her las rifle lowering, a relieved smile now slowly growing over her face as her eyes began to glisten. And then she stiffened and raised her rifle, firing her own concentrated beam and immediately ending the life of the would-be pawn of Shadrick's insane design.
Wait, what?
1313 flinched, the searing heat moving right past his head as the photonic ray of energy carved into the skull of Shadrick's tech adept, who...
Oh my god. Lord Admiral saw L. Shadrick, embarrassment of his uniform. He's been an embarrassment of his uniform ever since he was introduced to us. Like, seriously.
While momentarily stunned like the rest, had suddenly moved with desperate speed to activate the release sequence for the bomb. It was an act he left incomplete as his head came apart in a blaze of light, body thumping over his tech interrogators, blackened blood soon pooling over the instrumentation. And that was not the end of it, as Shadrick's remaining guards spun on their heels to return the lethality sent into their master, only to find the fleeting sight of a knife entering an eye on each soldier, Vetnex having acted in the same moment as Emiliana, slinging two of his 4 weapons into their faces, and ending their lives nearly as quickly as Emiliana had ended the life of the tech adept. The tension was high in the aftermath, the Kriegers in the room holding their weapons steady, ready to engage. But there was no one among the Death Corps present who ranked higher than a sergeant, leaving no single figure to determine the right and wrong of what had just happened.
Right.
All of it having had the creed of the Astra Militara invoked, the final judgment coming from one of their own.
Right.
Instead, now they all faced the same crux that 1313 had already crossed. The decision left entirely in their hands, and after a moment, those hands lifted the barrels of their weapons skyward. The commanding officer was dead. The new commanding officer was, by protocol, Sergeant Vetnex, since Captain Stern was technically still designated as unfit for duty. The Cadians were slower to imitate them, lasguns still aimed in towards the silent soldiers of the Death Corps, but that did not last long either. "Lower your weapons," Vet growled at them. "All of you, no more Imperials are killing each other today."
I love how that was explained, because this is exactly how the Kriegers would respond to something like this happening. This is exactly how they would respond to this.
Without hesitation, the Cadians complied, most still in shock even as they lowered their barrels to the ground. A few seconds later, as it sank in that no one was going to be killing them all or forcing a fight between them, a beleaguered cheer rose up from the men in green, first staggered and then unanimous. 1313 stared blankly as he was suddenly yanked forward into an embrace, Emiliana holding him tightly as she joined the chorus. Relief and elation mixing like a heady drug in every single soldier that still valued their life. The corpsmen had no reaction, standing right where they were and awaiting further orders, save for 1313, who felt an odd heat.
What's about to happen? This is more happiness than I've seen out of this since this started. Fan, what have you done? What have you done, Fan? I already know what's coming. Fan, X in chat if this is about to get very, very bad. Just saying.
Branding over his face as
Prepare
the
me, sir!
Pulled him in close. Captain Stern lifted himself back up to his
Oh my god. Death Grips. I admit I miss Shadrick. He was such a dick that I found him entertaining. Yeah, he was. And I'm glad he's dead.
feet, sweating profusely and grinning like an idiot, just as subject to the sudden relief as any of his men. He came over to 1313 and slapped his helmet as Emiliana blushed and gave him back a little space. Though the slap was playful, as opposed to chastising. "Emperor bless you, you crazy death-worshipping plank. I'll make sure you get promoted for this, soon as I get my captaincy back." The dark-skinned,
Thank you, Death
amethyst-eyed
Grips.
Imperial announced, a renewed cheer following the proclamation. The celebration, however, was cruelly short-lived.
Damn it!
Shadrick gasped, eyes suddenly fluttering into wakefulness, something only 1313 saw as it happened. His face tensed, and he tried to shove past the grateful captain, arm caught between them. Yet before he could fire off a second killing shot from his last pistol, the Commissar lifted his stolen plasma gun and aimed it up, shaky grip centering on the Kriegsman who had shot him and the captain standing in front of him.
For the Imperium!
The wounded Shadrick growled, blood flecking his white teeth before he jerked his arm higher still and fired. The shot sailed over their heads, the cheers dying on the lips of any voicing them as countless eyes followed the arcing ball of plasma. It slammed into the massive chain which held the bomb aloft, and in a flash of blue radiance, it ate through the metal and snapped the binding cleanly. The virus bomb, already opened and primed for detonation, hung for only a brief moment before plummeting into the pit, hurtling towards the heart of the world it would soon kill.
You insane frack!
Vet roared, speaking as he raised his arm, knife.
Hello, Doctus, my old friend. It's back again.
Brandished in his hand.
Damn it!
Threw it end over end at the
Seriously, Krieg's guardsman, Cadian guardsman, did you not remember the second rule of the zombie apocalypse?
Commissar on the ground, just
Damn
as
it!
1313 freed his arm and fired, both intent on ending Shadrick before the rest of them died from the bomb. But in a second flash of light, the Commissar was suddenly gone. Vetnex's knife burrowing 2 inches into the stone ground where Shadrick's head had been. A searing hot beam of light blowing a head-sized hole in the ground beside it. And all the while, everyone watched on. 1313 did not fear death, but somehow, this felt worse than death. This felt like failure, and his strength, long upheld, began to flee him rapidly.
Shadrick got away. Shadrick got away.
He sagged on his feet, supported by Emiliana as a wave of raw humanity passed through him. His raised arm dropped to his side, his heart racing, mind slowing, but thoughts entirely blank. Nothing could be done. No line could be charged. No tactic could be used. He had failed. He had
got
tried to do
teleported
the
away.
right thing, and he had failed.
13. It's all right, 13.
The corporal said to him, her voice trembling as she felt him slackening more and more. No, it isn't. I didn't stop him. Shadrick won. The Imperium lost, he said, words hollow. His lowered remaining arm shaking, his gun dropping from his hand.
This is the most depressing thing I have experienced thus far. Hobbit, thank you. Shadrick uses teleport. It's very effective. What the hell?
But the Cadian woman did not drop him, shoving him back onto his feet and grasping either side of his head.
You did what you thought was right,
she said to him, eyes boring into his remaining one, an eye that now stung, now rimmed with rare tears. You will still die.
It is horrible if a Krieg's guardsman is crying. It has gotten bad. Now Shadrick reports failure to Tarwaller. At this point, I hope Tarwaller melts him.
He said
Thank
in
you,
a
Hobbit.
whisper. She nodded her head, not denying it.
We all will. That isn't what matters now,
Was her answer to him. 1313 closing his eye as she wiped it for him. How can you say that? Even now, how are you like this? He asked her, wondering how she still had this strength, even in the face of a death she had wanted to avoid, even when he felt his faltering in the face of his failure. She firmed her expression,
hands sliding down to his shoulders and helping him steady himself.
Because I have always known what matters, and it still matters,
the corporal asserted.
not that we live, not even that we win.
She continued, pulling her hands back and allowing him to support himself fully, giving him a grim, humorless, but genuine smile.
Only that we try, onto our dying breath. All that is asked of us is that we never break and never stop aiming for the victory, for what is right, that we hold fast, even in the face of despair, even in the face of death. All that the Emperor demands of us is that we die standing.
And with the
Seriously? I have to get the hats off to Fan on this. He has put together some of the best stuff for 40K that I have heard. Like, flat out. The railing against the Xenos, by Farnham. This is just outstanding.
The words 1313 suddenly understood. His eye widened, and he nodded, his face, numbness receding. This was the strength of Cadia, the reason they had never broken when Krieg had been broken so long ago. This was the strength of Yurten, the true power of humanity. How had he not noticed it before? How had he confused death-seeking for this? The difference between his home and her own now became apparent in his mind.
The war pugs are hungry. They want shaggered kibble.
The Death Corps embraced death, accepted it, surrendered to it. The Cadian Guard stood firm against it, even if it meant death. They never surrendered to it. To embrace the end and to defy the end. Neither staved off death, but both defined its context. He steadied his face and nodded firmly back to her. Die standing. Yes, I can still do that, he stated, his voice not trembling, not entirely placid, but composed of a newer strength, and Emiliana's smile grew softer. There was no joy in it, but there was pride, and he shared it with her, if only for a brief moment. What a strange feeling. Pride. Not shame, not fear, not faith, but pride. So this was what it felt like to be free. He was oddly glad and thanked the Emperor that he could experience it at least once, even if only now, at the very end.
Well said,
spoke a voice from the entrance into the room.
Huh?
Well said indeed.
All faces turned to see the willowy shape of Ishtara Ordain, her body wrapped in bandages, her hand gripping a small flamer. She stalked and strode into the room like a being submerged in water, just heavy enough to propel herself forward. Holiness, said Captain Stern, his face stricken.
Is that who I think it is? Is that Grandma? Hi, Gramps!
Failed to stop him. The bomb, he began to explain.
All is as it should be. The Emperor's design cannot be subdued by something as meager as a virus bomb,
spoke the Canoness Superior.
Even as we speak, the entirety of the Imperium's forces on this planet are sheltering here, in the house of their Emperor. They shall not be betrayed. This I swear.
Grandma?
The old, bandaged woman announced, striding forward.
Go. Survive. Carry the lessons learned here to the rest of the Imperium. Ensure that St. Lazarus does not fail,
she continued to say as she walked up to and past the captain.
But Canoness, the weapon was primed,
shouted Sergeant Vetnex.
It will detonate the moment it strikes the ground. There is nothing that can be done,
he insisted. She scoffed at that and continued moving forward, acting as though the very voiced notion was ridiculous.
Who decided that?
She asked him without looking back in Vet's direction.
A man with a weapon. An inquisitor hiding in the shadows. A prideful sinner with a single breath left in his body? Is that all it takes to defeat your faith? Deny me not. I speak for the Emperor. I am his will made manifest, and I am not so easily defeated.
Yes!
Go, I said. Think no more of this. Leave it in the Master's hands. He shall not lead you astray.
Ishtara countered, moving closer and closer to the raised rim of the altar.
I absolutely love Grandma. Mr. Picker Gamer, Grandma is the real highlight of this episode. She's the highlight of every episode she's in, okay? She's like best character ever. Grandma issues out great value menu ass whoopings on a regular basis. You're about to absolutely lose your mind at what she says 1313. Yes, we are going to defy fate for the Emperor!
Venerable Canoness paused then, standing beside 1313 and Emiliana.
The two of you,
she announced, turning to face them, her eyes bright and golden, like the rays of the sun.
aid me. These old bones have one last journey to make.
Ishtara ordered. At her command, the two soldiers hesitantly nodded and went to either side of her, taking her hands and helping her as the ancient canoness endeavored to climb the tall base of the altar, stepping onto the heads of stone daemons and climbing upon the angled blades of the angels who struck down at them. As she did, she leaned heavily against 1313 in spite of his one arm, and her lips came close to his ear.
Keep that pride, man of Krieg. Stand taller than the sin that plagues you.
She said in a voice that was not her own, and when she pushed away from him and stood atop the rim of the pit, the Krieger was left breathless, his final eye wide as a plate as he tried to absorb her words.
I go now to do the Emperor's will.
If you don't understand what just happened, X in chat. If you do not have a clue why I'm freaking out over this, X in chat. Jeez! Oh my god. I'm dead. I'm finished right now, guys. I am finished. I love this story. Every single time I think that I've hit the peak of this, it keeps on delivering. Oh my god. This is... Oh my god. The Emperor just forgave a man from Krieg. It is legitimate. Nothing can beat that. Hobbit says he is with us. This is true, Hobbit. Josh Topkins says this is the single greatest moment of this entire series so far. From a sheer awesomeness standpoint, I say there's been some other ones, but it's from a sheer just like holy crap moment. Guys, imagine for a second something you know you'll never attain. You'll know you'll never attain, and then you got it. Oh my god, this is the gift that keeps on giving. That was Biggie's voice. Forgiving a Krieger. Talk about something I thought, oh yeah.
Sure that you do
I'm rewinding
the same.
Stepping onto the heads of stone daemons and climbing upon the angled blades of the angels who struck down at them. As she did, She leaned heavily against 1313 in spite of his one arm, and her lips came close to his ear.
Keep that pride, man of Krieg. Stand taller than the sin that plagues you.
She said in a voice that was not her own, and when she pushed away from him and stood atop the rim of the pit, the Krieger was left breathless, his final eye wide as a plate as he tried to absorb her words.
No kidding.
I go now to do the Emperor's will. Ensure that you do the same. The venerable priestess of war proclaimed to the assembled soldiers. And then, without further preamble, she leaned forward and fell into the yawning pit, descending like a thin lance wrapped in flagging bandages, aimed right for the soon-to-be rotting heart of Axum.
Go, go, Grandma! Oh my god, this is like...
Coleman ordered his command gunship to circle the entire perimeter.
Okay. We don't need to nuke... We don't need to nuke fans for cutting off that scene, because that was a perfect cutoff right there. Oh my god. I love this. Guys, GG in the chat for Grandma, because holy hell. Are you kidding me? Grandma has been one of the most outstanding characters in this entire damned series. GG for Grandma. She has been a total badass. Oh my god. Just outstanding. Here we go.
Of the Basilica several times, alien eye stalks taking in all he saw. The Imperial forces were abandoning their ruined walls and fortifications, retreating in layered withdrawals back into the massive central construct that was the Gothic cathedral at the center. His hundreds of gunships circled with him, most heavy with troops and vehicles, all unloading with strafing distance fire from their various laser cannons and missile launchers, encouraging the retreat and blasting the lines of imps as they fell back. Purple enemy gunships had been present, descending and disgorging additional forces from the enormous duo of Imperial starships which hung perilously above the battlefield, directly skyward of the Imperial Church Fortress. The alien Jedi Master clicked his tongue within his upside-down, lipless mouth, one of his eye stalks staring up at the gargantuan dreadnoughts as they exchanged fire with several encroaching Venators from all sides. Before they had been locked up with the Republic's space forces, K-Catch had noticed that they had fired various rounds of some kind of low-impact weapon into the spires around their combat.
The Jedi are about to find out what Space Marines are. They're about to find out what Space Marines are. Oh, it's a bad day.
That zone, all tall, but distant from the actual battlefield. The Jedi Council member was no stranger to odd deployment tactics and suspected that these were not weapons at all, but some method of quick disembarkment, and the scattered pattern of it all suggested some kind of encirclement. This was emphasized as the likely case within his alien mind as dropships followed the trails of those first salvos, even as the Venator reinforcements began to converge and fire into the imposing Imperial ships. Formidable though the invaders were, they were not invulnerable, and holding their positions in the air would mean they could only linger for a limited time.
Yes.
Before they were brought burning to the steel earth of Axum's already scarred surface. Whatever these new foes were about to try, it was clear to the Jedi Master that it was going to be a rapid endeavor, and so he was silently compelled to act rapidly as well. Rapidly, but not hastily. 500 Jedi Knights and over 10,000 clone troopers were at his command, a force which could conquer a planet.
brought
But you're about to run into something that conquers star systems. You poor bastards!
together to force the Imperials out of their holes. Kakash was determined not to squander them.
Commander Neo.
He said as he eyed both Earth and air simultaneously.
How many dropships have landed in the immediate battlefield we are about to engage in?
The commander strode to the side of his Jedi general and saluted.
No less than 3, maybe 5 total if they got some down before we were able to observe them. Many more to the surrounding spires, though.
I like this.
The clone reported. The Jedi Master nodded slowly, eyes blinking with sideways lids.
Contact Master Opor and Cesis. Request that he take another large contingent of Jedi and clones and secure those positions.
Master Oppo Rancesis, I know the next Nurgle worshipper when I hear it.
I do not want to suddenly find our forces surrounded. I would like the spires cleared and secured, and if not that, contained so that none of the forces on the spires are free to advance.
The council member ordered.
Yes, sir.
Was the clone's swift reply before he turned away and began to relay the request. While he did, Coleman Kakash turned his mind back towards the field of battle he would soon be invading. The civilian rebel casualties from this battle had been appalling. The charge towards the Basilica's defenses having left long, solid lines of corpses and wounded that he could easily see even now. Why had Master Mace Windu encouraged this kind of assault when it so obviously resulted in this atrocious rate of attrition?
Oh, you don't even know what's coming to you.
Admittedly, the late arrival of the Republic forces during the charge and his quick decision to withdraw from the perimeter of the combat zone had spared the Jedi many losses, both in the lives of their own order and that of the clones, but it also called into question the point of the attack at all.
Gamma Spectre says they think such optimism, oh bless their hearts. I normally ask if some of you guys are Star Wars fans, if you want to know what's going on right now and why I'm having the kind of like the appearance that I am, my facial features, and oh my god, this is...
It was a question he and the others would be sure to ask later.
Thank you,
But
Gamma.
the past was immutable, and the future needed to be shaped in the present. He doubted that the scant reinforcements which had landed would make a large difference, and their gunships, exposed on the ground, had remained only long enough to disgorge their warrior payloads, before rocketing away back up to their behemoth motherships, spitting light fire back at the Republic gunships as they retreated, neither side having had the chance to fully engage the other before they were gone. Coleman had barely managed to catch a glimpse of the last few reinforcements they dispatched, the large, purple and white armored warriors falling back into the cathedral almost as soon as they had disembarked. Space Marines, Coleman suspected. The most lethal possible warriors that the Imperial invaders could field, according to young Anakin Skywalker, who had nearly faced grievous injury or death at the hands of one of their own. But a literal handful of these kinds of soldiers could not stand against more than 50 times their number in Jedi, to say nothing of the clones who stood alongside them.
They didn't bring a
Even
handful.
so, Kakash was not quick to dismiss the threat, though in his mind, the encirclement and possible traps left behind by the Imperial retreat was where the greatest danger lay.
It is done, sir.
Reported Commander Neo.
Good. Have our armored forces begin landing outside of a perimeter. Have recon teams deploy along the outer and middle sections of the Imperial defensive front. Once free, they should quickly sweep the ruins and abandon the hardpoints for traps and unusual technology. Have them report anything they find. Detonate anything suspicious with demolition teams.
F in chat for this guy. I know it's coming.
As they clear the area, have the Warhammer and speeder tanks advance with infantry to board.
The Master commanded, pointing down at the ground at landing zones as he did.
Once we have cleared and secured the outer and center portions of the approach, I want our forces to completely encircle the area around the cathedral. Have every AT-TEs take up their furthest positions to supply the front with focused fire. and create avenues for our TX-130s to move and respond freely to active threats. Over the purple tanks following behind our gunships to move in behind everything else once they arrive. We will need them to provide defense from exterior attack. And under overlapping fire support for our forces once they re-engage the Empire.
He continued.
Aye, sir. And the Jedi?
Neo asked after a brief pause.
My order leader shall remain airborne and will move in our strike forces to address anything unexpected or dangerous that may crop up.
Ave Maria! This is gonna hurt.
Once we have the entire exterior of the cathedral under our control, we shall deploy in force for the actual storming of their fortress. This way, we will never be too far from where we are needed, and will lead the charge past their final defensive structures.
Bitch, you
K-Cash
think?
explained to the commander, who nodded and snapped a quick salute before turning to relay the orders. Even with his plan now being acted out, the Angry Jedi Master was wary and reminded himself to remain flexible. There was no telling how the Imperials might react or what plans they themselves may already have in the works. He sensed great danger approaching, but for some reason he did not feel that danger was coming from the Basilica alone, nor the surrounding towers where the Space Marines had potentially deployed themselves. He turned his eyes away from where the fight would be occurring and faced them towards the horizon. Distantly, very distantly, his alien eyes could see another storm beginning to form there, punctuated by streaks of red lightning which menaced him even from so many miles away.
How long before that storm reaches us, Commander Meal?
He asked suddenly.
It's about to
The
get
clone,
there.
who was busy communicating the attack plan, looked up and then stared in the same direction as the Jedi Master, withdrawing a pair of electro-binoculars to look through a moment later. He shrugged.
Maybe 45 minutes to an hour from now. Storms are common here on Axum, sir. According to the troopers we are relieving, they've already had plenty of rain today alone.
Okay, so guys, if you remember, okay, the Jedi that have been on the planet are now off the planet. Most of the clones have been relieved. So these people coming in, they are they haven't even started to get the ass whooping. They haven't even started. They don't have a clue what's going on. And they are about to have an this is going to be...
He informed the Jedi General. Coleman nodded warily, eyes still on that encroaching, twisting sneer of black clouds and distant thunder.
Yes, perhaps. Let us continue to talk.
And the demon host hasn't even showed up yet. And Tar Weiler still has those Jedi.
Commander, I want to be invading that final fortification well before we are rained on.
He said. Neo nodded sharply.
Right away, sir. We'll get this place secured on the double.
Saint Lazarus grit his teeth, pain shooting up through his various injuries as he was carried atop several shoulders and hands. His armored body ferried in an ocean of desperate humanity as he was moved within one of the adjoining chapels within the massive basilica. He had initially been brought into the temple by the strength and support of the canoness alone. Yet it had not taken long once crossing into the building for his state to be noticed by many others. They took it upon themselves to lift him high, moving him through the growing press. The basilica, empty moments before, was now rapidly filling with a chaotic mob of wounded soldiers and survivors from all branches of the Imperium, all who remained free on this cursed planet. But large though the building was, it was never intended to house so many as now sought to enter, and that was becoming obvious to see. Medical beds were laid out into hallways. Soldiers scrambled and pushed through the crowds, running to engage some kind of struggle or fight happening deeper within the basilica. And the pristine white floors of the Emperor's home were soon tarnished and dirtied by blood, ash, and whatever else the myriad forces of mankind dragged onto them. Tech priests and sisters of the noble orders of the Hospitlar moved through and between the many others, often suspended above the hordes of the Imperial survivors on hovering harnesses or spider-like mechadendrites,
Guys, it's about to get real. Let's
using
go.
the devices to stalk above the pressed masses of people and beds. Those who had no such augmentations stepped on the posts and sides of medical beds or climbed around shrines and ornate pillars, their sometimes bare and sometimes booted feet lithely balancing along as their hands and arms held assortments of data slates or clusters of medical necessities. Some space was eventually made for Lazarus, given his status, but he hardly believed he deserved it after the failure he had just suffered at the walls. It simply did not matter how many they killed or tried to force back, the Republic was becoming more numerous by the second, and their weapons of war, from tanks to airships, grew more varied by the minute. The faithful of the Machine God and the Emperor alike were trapped, clustered around each other like a swarm of drowning rats, taking up the last aired space on their rapidly sinking ship. And worse yet, the new Saint had no idea how to even begin to save them. So many reached for him, so many prayed for him, so many now depended on him, and the final words of Ishtara Ordain hung heavily in his mind. He had a duty to these people, not to win the battle, but merely to survive it. But what could be done now?
Love this music.
There was very nearly no way out, and what ways there were, well, he could not see them, though he held to the faith that they did exist. The Emperor would not abandon them.
Nope.
The Master of Mankind would not have returned Lazarus from death only to fail. Would he? The heretical thoughts made him resent his position all the more. He was no major, no saint. Saints did not have doubts. Their faith was
Yes, they do.
absolute. He could not help but feel an imposter throughout all of this, and yet he dared not show it. He owed the men and women around him too much for that. Before space had been created, Lazarus had spent this time doing what he could to ease those who came close, blessing the faithful who pleaded for it, taking ash and sweat from his own face and brow, and rubbing it into vaguely avian forms on the foreheads of the various humans who looked up towards him with eyes begging salvation.
Thank you, Slacker. If Sigurd was perpetual, how would the Black Templar change? The Black Templar would have stomped out the Black Legion, which they already were in the process of. Definitely. Just destroy them. Guys, thank you, Slacker. I really do appreciate it, bud.
He voiced paltry blessings to each, and, impotent as they were, the words were drowned out more often than not by the heavy cacophony all around him. Orders, panic, prayers, all wrung from the high walls and vaulted ceilings of this holy place, echoing in spaces which had previously been meant for choir music and sermons. However, after a time, Leandra thundered at those around him, demanding space be made, and, even divested of her powered armor, her lungs clearly did not lack for the strength, and, by the force of her voice alone, the press around them was made to obey. Soon, after they were through the chapel, the unspoken question of where they were taking him was answered without words needing to be spoken. His body was carried up and up, through stairway passages, into an area of the Basilica of Salvation which had not yet been filled, or at least not completely. There was much more space here, and he could see the reason why right away. Medals, pauldrons of elaborate design, fine augmentations and gold-plated lasguns, humming plasma weapons, and sparking power swords and fists. All around him, the Saint saw commanders, captains, and a few wounded majors who had joined with the retreating forces on their way to the Basilica, or who had been in some position around the besieged temple. The thought that other men, so much more like himself, were being forced into the press downstairs made the teeth he had left in his mouth grit together painfully.
Cobra Gladiator said, "Hey, Old Man Reacts. I've had these questions come to mind about modern weapons versus 40k weapons. 50 BMG versus tied up basic guardsman, the strongest character vehicle who died to the... Yeah, true. The only thing that survives Zarbon would be Vulcan."
But he understood the necessity of it.
True.
How could they plan their way out of this while trapped in the cacophonous press that was to be found downstairs? None of the command staff here were silent, all speaking amongst each other, and half of them even properly discussing solutions in place of bemoaning their pessimistic outcome.
And the things that he's feeling right now, he is feeling kind of imposter syndrome, but that's only to be expected. Even Celestine had this kind of thing. Celestine actually comes from the ranks of the Repentia for the sisters. Saint Celestine was not convinced of her own righteousness when she was still mortal. She was not convinced of her own everything when still mortal. So, the way he's feeling is not unusual. It's not even close to unusual. So these thoughts are perfectly rational. He just has to hold it together.
He was not stopped here, however, taken further and further until he was laid onto a medical bed within the private shrine of the Canoness Superior herself. The sacred space was oddly austere, the room being barren, save for a few prayer mats, some select icons of the faith which hung from the walls, and a single banner of the Sisterhood which hung above the winged doorway. In the center of it all, music. A white marble carving of the Emperor himself stood tall, one which seemed half completed, the vagueness of their god emerging from the white stone like the semblance of a man bursting from an ocean of pale white milk. The saint was not alone within, even after those who had helped carry him in were curtly dismissed by the Canoness commander, who had been serving as his bodyguard throughout the battle. Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Pick a Gamer. This is why Lazarus is the best character of the series so far. Despite being from the 40k side of things, he is one of the most humane and empathic characters. Also kind of a badass cyborg. This is true, Mr. Pika. Lazarus meeting Caiaphas Cain, League of Imposters. It's just some guy, yes, you're exactly right. And here's the thing, guys. We look at 40k and we judge them for what they... we say, oh, he's one of the most humane and empathic characters, even though he's from 40k. If you're looking at that from the Star Wars kind of thing, yes, it can seem that the Imperium is horrible. Technically, if you looked at the Imperium and put them through the alignment scale, they're lawful evil. Flat out. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But it doesn't mean the people within it are that way. It does not mean that at all. In 40k, they have to be this way, or else terrible things happen. So it's a situation where they're evil by necessity versus evil by choice. Because they would much rather not be this way if they actually had a choice. So, yes. Here we go.
Andra stood away from him after the others had...
Yeah, guys. Please do not say anything remotely around spoilers. Even though I'm a brick and stupid, I can be deductive, and I don't want that to happen.
Departed, kneeling before the statue of the Emperor, her hands clasped together, head lowered in prayer and supplication, as another three sisters entered the room and approached his bed, crowding around Lazarus. Their hands reached for him, peeling away his armor and then sackcloth robes to...
I've seen enough vids to know where this is going.
...expose his many new but minor injuries. They paid his modesty little heed, chanting prayers all the while, even as he raised meager and ignored protests. Distracting himself from their ministrations, the saint looked around. Only the lit wall scones provided any substantial light, but it was enough to see by. Already waiting within was a tall woman who he assumed to be Commissar Jane Leros, the one who had saved all of their lives with her timely intervention, and whose sudden arrival had turned the Republic back, even if only temporarily. She had divested herself of her power fist and other weapons, save for a bolt pistol which hung at her waist, the other items dangling from a steel hook on the wall near where she was leaning. She was holding what appeared to be a skull in her hands, the severed head cleanly flensed and lightly luminous in
Lovely.
the twilight of the chamber.
Sounds good.
Lazarus very nearly missed the other figure standing behind the statue of the Emperor, looming at the intersection of several shadows. There stood a leering, red-eyed soldier whose face was encased in a full ceramite mask. A Tempestus Scion, Lazarus realized, before amending his observation. No, not just a mere soldier of that elite corps, but none other than a Tempestor Prime, or at least that was what his regalia and uniform seemed to indicate. The Thunderbird emblem he wore on his dark armor, and the muted colors of dark red, deep blue, and dull gray which formed the checkerboard pattern on his shoulder cape marked him out as a Calambian, and the very same man who had saved Lazarus' life at the Battle of the Bloody Bridges.
Nice.
The Prime, known as Aloysius Cinder. Then he spotted the other hospital bed in the corner of the room in place of a cross from his own. A preternatural darkness seemed to linger there, at least until Lazarus noticed that there were obstructions on the wall scones, black knives embedded into their sides at odd angles, creating strips of shadow which all converged on that corner, hiding its two inhabitants in flickering, wavering darkness. A small woman and an enormous man were there, the man sitting on the bed, his back leaned against the wall. It was not clear if the man was alive, for he seemed unmoving, and he was clearly badly wounded, dried and clotted blood leading the way to the bed from across the otherwise clean floor.
Is that Sammy boy?
The man was wearing a dark trench coat which spilled over the sides of the medical bed. The woman wearing something similar, but much smaller. She was helping to brace the larger man against the wall, herself perched to his side, one hand pressed against his chest to keep him steady, while the other held a wicked curved blade of the same kind as those embedded into the sides of the scones. She leered around, a guardian's air about her, as she held the weapon out threateningly, as if warding away any who might see, forcing them to keep their distance. The woman was of blonde hair and pale complexion, and her eyes seemed to glow a malevolent red as they swept back and forth across the room. These two Lazarus did not know at all, but he could remember them from the battle, fighting against the Jedi. He had not witnessed
Whooping the Jedi's asses, frankly.
the full
Excellent Chattanooga, James Walker. I was waiting for that to show up.
conclusion of that battle, but judging from the slumped and still form of the black-haired man, it had not gone well. Whoever they were, being allowed into this room meant something for certain, even if he did not yet know what. Lazarus bided his time, as he could not speak or address any of them with any dignity, while the sisters Hospitaller who surrounded him did their work, rebandaging his wounds, stitching him shut where he was bleeding, jamming tools into his mouth to yank his broken teeth and replace them with quick, augmentative replacements, and painfully removing the remains of his mechanical arm and leg, leaving him lopsided and out of balance. They worked quickly, however, and in only a handful of minutes they were wrapping his body back within his sackcloth raiment, daubing his bruised skin with sacred oils, and whispering blessings over him. Once their work was completed, they stood up and began backing away while bowing and facing him, bending multiple times every couple of steps until they were outside the doors, which closed. Lazarus was not sure he would ever grow accustomed to that kind of reverence, groaning as he pushed himself upright with his remaining living arm and sat, crippled but alive, in the medical bed. He was surprised that they had made no attempt to heal the other man against the wall, perhaps realizing that he was already dead, or perhaps not wanting to come anywhere near his red-eyed guardian. He did not have much time to contemplate it, however, since the moment the Hospitaller departed, 3 of the others in the room approached him. Leandra rose from her prayer, forming the sign of the aquila over her breast, as Jane pushed off from the wall and straightened her hat and burnt overcoat. All the while, Cinder turned to fully face Lazarus and sauntered out from beneath the shadows, stepping like a cat in the Commissar's own wake. The saint gave them a wan smile, feeling his guts clench as he realized that, once more, he was playing center to a group of figures who far outstripped him. How, by the Emperor's golden teeth, had he ended up in this situation?
No idea.
Saint Lazarus?
Spoke the Commissar, her voice clipped, but not unpleasant.
I do not believe we have formally been introduced. I am Commissar Colonel James Lee Ross, at your eternal service.
She greeted with a stiff salute. Lazarus raised an eyebrow at those words. He had not expected that to be her claimed title, not by a long shot. Commissar Colonel? Isn't that kind of function a little unorthodox? He pried, trying not to show the difficulty he was having in finding his sitting balance with only one arm and one leg. She smirked subtly at him and gave a brief nod.
It can appear that way, Holiness. But, like you, I only achieved my current rank after this battle had already commenced. I have been given this promotion in recognition of my efforts and successes concerning the preservation of our main forces at the slaughter of the spires.
She reported, hands behind her back and legs spread, her back straight as a rod. Still, I can't remember the last time that rank was earned by anyone at all. Tales of Commissar Gaunt and his ghost aside, I had thought its existence was no more than a soldier's rumor, not an actual option for command. The saint said, softly questioning the legitimacy of her claim.
And yet, it is my rank.
She asserted. Lazarus shrugged his shoulders and sighed, suppressing a wince as an agonized sting wrung its way through his injured, missing arm. Seems like...
One second, guys.
Like I'll see every strange exception play out before I'm sent back to the Emperor's side. Lazarus suggested, indicating for her to relax with his remaining arm and almost falling over for the effort. She did so, but relaxed her stance only slightly.
Well, with...
Hey guys, one thing. I see some of the comments on the AI voices. One of the things about this is you never know how it's really going to sound until you get it out there. And considering that, it's not even worth commenting on. This is this thing, a whole episode has been gold so far.
All due respect, Your Holiness, the promotion was handed down to me directly by Marshal Dovin approximately 8 minutes before the fall of Central Command. So, I'd say that my elevation is less of an exception than your own rise to the rank of Major.
She offered, face stern, but tone hinting at the jibe being no more than that. Lazarus felt a twitch ring across his face. This Commissar Leros had an effective way of showing how much she already knew without leading the conversation fully into it. The recently anointed saint nodded his head and resolved to change the subject, not intending to mince words with a political officer.
Yeah, you don't
Fair
want to do
enough,
that.
Commissar Colonel. I did receive reports about the Battle of the Azure Spires, but what I was given was sparse and sometimes contradictory. He began to say,
Slaughter, Holiness. It was a slaughter.
She corrected without hesitation, strong face hardening as she spoke. How so? What happened? He asked without missing a beat.
It's hard to work out the details. However, what is clear is that the Jedi preempted our route. They knew we would come to the aid of the Basilica, and they placed themselves in and among the surrounding spires around the primary road of Silver Central Avenue, which created the route we were using to travel.
Leros began to report. They ambushed you there?
They're going to...
Lazarus asked,
Give
but
me.
she shook her head.
Not as such, Holiness. They did not confront us directly until after the slaughter was completed.
The Commissar corrected again. Then how? Lazarus began to ask.
It was the spires themselves. The witches found a way to drop and direct their descents. They dropped the city on us, Holiness. By the time we understood the nature of the attack, the spires were already falling on us, and we were trapped by the organization of our own columns. We lost a lot of tanks and a lot of good people before we even saw a single Jedi.
Yeah.
Jane Leros explained.
X in Chattanooga, Jarek Hicks. AI Commie Mommy, what are you thinking?
Lazarus was taken aback by that. He had been under the impression that he and his had gotten the worst of the fighting. It looked like he had several assumptions to correct on that matter. I see. How on Terra did you make it out of there with so many people? He asked, but again, she shook her head.
Not so many, Holiness. Figures are hard to collect right now, but I reckon only about 30% of our main force managed to escape the spire attack. The Jedi plot was largely a resounding success. And then they fell on us directly. Only Jedi, no toy soldiers. Their force was comprised of thousands of psychers, all armed with power swords, all trained for what they proceeded to do to us.
The saint breathed in deeply, knowing that a similar fate was gathering outside of the basilica, priming itself to fall upon them just as ravenously. A whole army of thousands of psychers, and this time, they would not be alone. How was the Imperium supposed to stand against that kind of enemy? So how did you escape? Did the Jedi let you flee? He asked, and she scoffed lightly in response.
The Hellgas theme?
We would all be dead, or the prisoners of the Jedi, had they been fully successful. No, Holiness. They showed us no mercy. Many acknowledged my coordination and quick actions afterward as factors in our survival, but the truth of the matter is that we were saved by the same man who stopped the spires from falling on all of us, who spent himself and his life saving everyone he could before it was too late.
Jane admitted, letting the words hang in the air before lifting the skull and making every eye squint as she did. The luminous skull was not so bright as she held it clutched in her hand, yet looking directly at it prompted the same response from everyone, each Imperial feeling a sudden pressure meeting their minds. To Lazarus, it felt like wind being blown right into his face, right up against his eyes, though there was no billowing movement, no sign of force or physical presence. The skull itself was odder than he had thought upon first spotting.
If you guys don't remember, this is most likely the skull of the Psyker that held up the city. Just saying.
Her holding it. In the center of its forehead was a patch of bone which seemed to have been smoothed and calcified into the semblance of a quartz crystal, and from it streaked veins of the same material, creating a languid, wavy starburst of clear gemstone which spread its tendrils across the breadth of the bone it had grown into.
What is that?
Canoness Leandra growled, her hand falling to the pommel of her sword, which she still wore around her waist in a tertiary holster she had gotten for herself. The Commissar turned to look at her at the words, apprehension tightening her expression somewhat.
This is Saint Crowl, Holy Sister. He was a Chimera Psyker under the command of Commissar Terrandor. It was he who sacrificed his life holding up the spires. My squad and I tried to save him, but by the time we had him in our custody, he was already dissolving.
Dead.
What I hold here is all that remains of Crowl. But, as you can feel, what remains is much more than just his skull.
Jane Lee Ross explained as she held the item up before Lazarus.
He was a
Excellent chat to Nuke misplaced ODST.
witch.
Leandra snarled.
And this feels like heresy. He was not anointed. You have no right to call him a saint.
The Canoness added angrily, and Jane's face scrunched in response, but her discipline did not break.
With respect to the Holy Sister, he died speaking the Emperor's words. He saved us all multiple times. First, by standing against an army of true witches and apostates, holding back their schemes and victory, and then countless more times in the battle that followed.
The Commissar explained. Elaborate, ordered Lazarus, and she nodded.
What you are feeling now, the Jedi can feel it as well, but several hundreds of times more powerfully.
She added, now lowering the skull and resuming her rigid posture.
I can fully and personally attest to seeing this man kill at least 22 Jedi, even after his death. Without his Aegis, who would never have made it back to Central Command.
Nice.
We would not have been able to drive the Jedi away. I would never have been promoted, and we would never have been able to reach you and drive the Republic back.
The Commissar stated sharply. Leandra gave a sour expression and seemed to be about to protest the words further, but Jane continued to speak.
If Crowl is a heretic, then heresy has saved this basilica and all the faithful within it. I do not believe that to be the case, so I cannot agree that Crowl is a heretic. He went above his duty, and because of it, we can all stand here and debate his sainthood at all. If not for him, we would be kneeling on the ground in the face of Republic blasters, or being thrown as corpses from the sides of the city.
She concluded. Leandra did not look pleased, barely placated in fact, but she did not object or speak quickly enough to stop Lazarus from speaking first. Well said, Commissar. I'll not turn away any ally right now. Not when we are being ground beneath the Republic's pale heel. Not when we need all the help we can get.
Yes.
He said, but the severe look Leandra threw his way had him suddenly sweating. The last thing he needed was an internal conflict, and so he thought quickly. However, he added a moment later, perhaps it is best if we turn Gaxian's remains over to the Sisterhood for now. Maybe he is merely a great hero of the Imperium. Or maybe I am not the only saint to be found on this planet.
Maybe.
Whatever the case may be.
That's called humility, and humility's all right in my book.
I believe the brides of the Emperor are the most qualified to determine what is the Emperor's will. Are we agreed? He offered to the two women, who even then seemed to glare at one another, Leandra's scowl being the most open of the two.
Absolute catfight about to occur between a commissar and a hospitaller. For some reason, this seems kind of familiar. I don't know why. No idea why. Mr. Pika, thank you. Leandra should be worshipping that skull. He was a true saint. The man evaporated himself so he could save all those faithful. Just realized that Gaxian himself turned into a WMD level pariah. This is true.
Neither seemed entirely pleased by his words, but they also seemed less likely now to suddenly begin fighting amongst themselves, and with a stiff nod, Jane Leros held out the skull to the sister, who hesitantly reached out and took it. After a brief moment's consideration, the canoness left the room with the head of Gaxian Crowl in hand, saying nothing more about her intentions as she left. Jane seemed stressed by the entire series of actions, but Lazarus waved at her to calm down. Have faith, Commissar Colonel. All will be well. He assured her, and after a breath's span of stillness, she seemed to relent with a slightly less stiff nod of her chin.
Of course, Holiness.
She affirmed. Good, good. Well, now that we are acquainted, let me offer a word of thanks before we move on to the planning of this defense, said Lazarus, reaching down with his remaining arm to grip the side of the bed to keep himself steady. I thank you, Commissar Colonel Jane Leros. Without your intervention, I doubt I or the canoness would still be in any position to debate anything.
Nice.
And I extend the same thanks to you, Tempestor Prime Cinder. You saved my life at the Battle of the Bloody Bridges. I did not get the opportunity to thank you before, so let me do so now.
Nice.
Without you, I'd be less than a smear 100 miles below the Basilica. Lazarus offered to them, gesturing towards the, till now, silent leader of the Calambian Thunderbirds. The tall man nodded once, almost robotically. Doing my duty, nothing more, were his succinct words, and after another pause to see if he would add any more, Lazarus nodded somewhat awkwardly and coughed. All right. Well, if anyone has any ideas as to how we can stave off the Republic's next assault, I'm all ears.
Okay, guys. Okay. So, it is a little bit past 12. And for me, I have to work tomorrow. We are going to pause here. And we're going to come back to this tomorrow. I'm actually out of drink and I'm trying not to cough. And the room has actually kind of gotten hot. This segment's almost over. How much further? How much further there, Hobbit? Let's see. 20. There's another 15 minutes. 15 minutes. All right. We'll stick with it. We'll stick with it. Here we go. Yeah, I actually need rest. Okay, hold on a second. Fine. We will keep in the chat. Here we go. Oh, okay. So people are saying, yeah. People are saying, okay. People are getting ready to pass out. We will finish this tomorrow. I'm actually going... Tomorrow starts my weekend. So, as soon as I get off work, I'm going to be coming in here, sitting down. Well, literally turning this way, because my work computer's right here now. This is my work desk right here. We're going to start this up tomorrow. I'm going to start the stream at 10. Okay? And we're going to go through the entire, like the rest of this. We're not stopping. We're going to finish it. X in chat if this has been awesome. X in chat if this has been awesome. If this has been everything that you expected and more. Because I know it has been for me. And I have been very happy with this. Extremely happy with this. It has had that mixture. I just can't wait to see what happens when the Jedi have gone. So, one thing before we do go. This here, let me get this up here. And let me do some stuff here. Just want to show you guys something. We got sent to me earlier. Let's see. What is it? If you figure this out, start doing it automatically. If you figure this out, start doing it automatically. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. If you figure out what this says, start doing it automatically. I'm just saying. Hobbit says, praise be to the man emperor of mankind. Yes. Yes. This is amazing. I have loved this ever since I first started watching this. Guys, I hope you guys had fun tonight. I hope you guys join me tomorrow. Yes. Yes, drop them. Drop them all. Drop them all. It is what it is, guys. I'm going to head off. I'm going to go sit down and see to the war pugs. And then I'm not sure what I'm going to do. But I'm going to take a breather for a little bit. I would, if fans still in the chat, once again, guys, Fan has done an amazing job with the series. Fan has done an absolutely amazing job with this series. And I actually want to, wow, just absolutely outstanding. We're going to get it back into this tomorrow. I will catch you guys next time. I am boiling alive in this room right now, just to let you guys know.